Hey guys, Jen here. Wanted to do a quick little video to show you something I've been working on. And I've been working on this kind of, on the side while I do businessy things and marketing and all that. And actually, Jordan suggested that I do this story, and I ran with it, and I got really excited about it. Well, excited in not a not a fun way, but in a oh my gosh, I really want to get them sort of way. So my beef is with the Center for American Progress. And for those of you who aren't familiar, the Center for American Progress is the progressive think tank that essentially researches and puts together papers for policy for politicians in DC. And they are deeply, deeply embedded with the corporate Democrats like Hillary Clinton and Obama and Bill Clinton when he was in office. All of these people are in the same orbit. They come from the same, come through the same revolving door. They're either in office or working on campaigns or back in the think tank sphere. And yes, Center for American Progress is a think tank. And if you're not familiar with that, basically they are these centers, these nonprofit organizations that do affect policy in DC. Think tanks are designed to do research, to come up with policy ideas. And that in and of itself isn't bad, but where it becomes bad is when you look at the people who are running these think tanks, the people who are funding these think tanks, and the people who are on things like the board of directors of these think tanks. And one person affiliated with CAP, deeply, deeply affiliated, is Neera Tanden. If you're on Twitter and you're a progressive, you've no doubt come in contact with Neera Tanden. In fact, Jordan is blocked by Neera. I haven't been blocked yet, so I count my blessings on that, or maybe I don't. But she's quite feisty on Twitter and is not a progressive at all. So they on their official paperwork, they dub themselves as nonpartisan, but they're clearly, marketing themselves as the progressive think tank. So you'll see some familiar names as I start to talk about this. John Podesta, for one thing. As you know, he was chairman of Hillary Clinton's 2016 bid for president. He was also previously at the very, very top of Center for American Progress. He is a Clinton ally for sure. And Neera is now the president and CEO of the Center for American Progress. She sits at the top. She is a woman. She's a woman of color. She's come from kind of a rough background. I mean, her family was on welfare when she was young. And I'll tell you what's kind of nuts about that with how she conducts herself these days a bit later. But yeah, let me start just telling you why Jordan and I were so upset with Neera. And if you haven't seen these videos yet that Jordan did about this topic, then go back after you watch this and take a look. So Beto O'Rourke became this darling of celebrities and funders and Democrats. He was running for Senate against Ted Cruz. Ted slid through and won. Beto had a real chance, and he was absolutely the best choice for Senate in Texas. Ted Cruz unfortunately won. Meanwhile, Beto had this sort of like celebrity aura. He is a smooth talker. He's attractive to some people, I hear, and he's kind of like that progressive he's that Democrat that pretends to be progressive, but in reality, in voting records and policies, he's actually not, which makes him the perfect CAP, Center for American Progress. I'll say as CAP from here on out, just because it's easier. He is the perfect CAP guy. I mean, Neera is goo-goo for Beto. And there were some journalists who actually did some diving and investigation, which I know is like very foreign to people in CAP. But they looked into Beto's record and his donors, and the fact that he's taken a lot of oil and gas money, and the fact that he's not as progressive as he says he is, or as he purports himself to be. He's in fact like standard centrist Democrat. And Neera Tanden was very, 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 very upset about this. That got us to thinking that we needed to dig into Center for American Progress. They've been this fly that progressives want to swat away because it's so clear once you start looking into them at all, and once you see any of Neera's interactions on Twitter. I don't know why Cap still allows her to have Twitter, because she's a nightmare with it. It gets funny sometimes. You know, we should look into this even more. Not just to get on Neera's nerves, but because it's important. Because these are the people who are suggesting policy, who are putting out these facts and figures, and who are, as I say in the piece, they're wolves in sheep's clothing. That's absolutely what they are. So I'm going to go through my piece a little bit here. I won't go through it all, as I said, just bits and pieces to kind of give you a preview of what's to come when I do publish it. And I want to say this is actually part 1 of 3 parts I'll be doing. Might be 4, we'll see. Because there's so much. If you saw my mind map, if you know what those are, there's like the bubbles, and you connect them to each other with your different thoughts and notes and pictures and things like that. Screenshots, all that. And it got to be, if you've seen Homeland, it got to be like Carrie when she was connecting all the dots and she's in her manic stage, which I don't want to make light of mental illness. They do a great job of depicting that on the show. But when she's in that stage where she like has all of these things tucked together with yarn and whatever, it looks like that. So I went overboard. And I said to Jordan, you know, I have gathered so much information. Like, there are so many different ways that Cap is terrible that I don't even know where to start. I mean, the obvious place was to start with the donors, which I will do. That will be one of the parts of the series. But I kind of felt like I wanted to not do that as the first one. Not because it's not important, not because there isn't shady stuff there, but because really who makes up an organization are the people at the top, the people who have, say, been invited to be on the board of directors. And those people are who we're going to get into today. And even I, like, I knew going in that these people were going to be shady, but I didn't expect it to this level. I mean, it's bad. It's not even, I haven't seen anyone else report on this, but it's so bad. This progressive organization has surrounded themselves with the worst of the worst. It's nuts, and you'll see why. But going back to my spreadsheet, like, there's stuff with the United Arab Emirates where they're affiliating themselves and going on trips with and accepting money from the United Arab Emirates, who have commit so many human rights violations. It's disgusting. But Cap is fine being in bed with them. That's just one example. I promise you I will get to those things, because what I found really, really shocked me. And yeah, I mean, there's not much more to say on that topic. You'll see what's coming. So basically, the board of directors is full of rich, very, very, very rich. Like, these people have funded various Democratic people, mostly corporatists, for a long time. They have billions of dollars, but they're these rich white guys, the very embodiment of the elite, of the people who have so much power and so much money that they get away with everything and anything. And you'll see more about one of these guys in particular that's gotten away with a lot of shady stuff, a lot of terrible stuff. You would think that they would want to fill their board of directors with people of color, with women, with people who experience America as real Americans. not as the people who are the top 1%. But no, that's not what they do at all. They're in practice neoliberal. There's no way else, no other way to put it. They're essentially center left. They've teamed up. Also, this was one of the things that Neera was not happy about, and actually we inquired with Center for American Progress about. They've teamed up with the ultra-conservative American Enterprise Institute, by the way. This is just another side note before I get into the board of directors. But that's funded by the Koch brothers. I'm sure you're familiar with the dangers of the Koch brothers and the sorts of things that they fund. But Center for American Progress, these progressives, see it fit to associate with the American Enterprise Institute, and they've published papers together. So when we wrote to CAP and we said, you know, hey guys, why are you doing this? Also, why did you donate $200,000 to these people? You know, as if it's not enough to go on, you know, host panels together and put out papers together. They donated $200,000 to them. So they got back to us and they said, oh, this was we were just dispersing their part of a donation that was given for this purpose, was what it boiled down to. I don't buy that, and we followed up by asking, okay, so who made this original donation, and who wanted CAP and AEI to work together? So we still haven't heard back. I doubt we will, but we'll try again. Anyway, these guys, so to put like CAP's misdeeds into like a little summary, they push charter schools. They're not progressive on education at all. They're not progressive on healthcare at all. You might have seen this if you're on Twitter or social media. They got a lot of heat for recently pushing something called Medicare Extra for All. And if you look at the policy, which I linked to in the piece, you'll see it's not at all Medicare for all. Remember, it has that word extra in it. And yeah, their whole history, including one of the particular guys on the board of directors, you'll see why they're not pushing Medicare for all. They're pushing Medicare Extra for all, which is, again, a terrible idea. They've also taken neocon positions on Iran and Syria, and in some cases, their papers have won praise from Oseba. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but he's the U.S. ambassador from the United Arab Emirates. He was very excited about their Middle East policy papers. I wonder why. So this all matters because politicians and presidencies and, you know, the bigwigs in Washington rely on think tanks to help them form their policies, as I said. And there's this revolving door where the people in these think tanks then rotate into the administration, or they're donors, or they're on the board of directors. It's this cesspool. It's terrible. So obviously the buck stops with Neera Tanden, who, as I said, is the president and CEO of CAP. And rabid Twitter, whatever she is. Her salary from CAP is $348,125 in 2017, and we found that by looking at the 990 forms of CAP. So they have to make these 990 forms public as a nonprofit, which they do. CAP does that, but that gets into staff salaries and stuff at the top, but it does not get into donor information. I was able, again, to find that donor information. They sort of hide it. And yeah, Neera gets a huge salary. They spend a lot of money. It's more than $50 million a year. So it's quite a bit that they have in their pockets and the ability to spend to enact their policies and push their agenda. So let's see. The 8 board members, out of the 8, there are 2 women, Neera Tanden and Kristen Mugford, and there's 1 person of color, and that's Neera. The rest are old white dudes, which is not very progressive. As a progressive, you're supposed to surround yourself with different ideas, people from different backgrounds, people of different color, and they don't do that at all. So I'm going to go into each of these people one by one. First, I'll go through the list. Former Senator Tom Daschle, who's the chair. Neera Tanden, president. Glenn Hutchins, Kristen Mugford, John Podesta, Tom Steyer, Donald Sussman, and I don't know how to say this, but Hans-Jörg Wyss. So we'll start with Neera Tanden. Tanden has worked for President Bill Clinton, the 2008 Hillary Clinton campaign, and the Barack Obama campaign and administration. She considers herself to be a very loyal soldier of the Clinton family. And if you're familiar with the Clinton family, you know what that means. Corruption, corporatization, oligarchy. She said in a leaked email, that was leaked by WikiLeaks, of course, in 2016, but I should say that I would do whatever Hillary needs always. I owe her a lot, and I'm a loyal soldier. Oh, how sweet. You can see their love now, right through the screen. So her Clinton alignment is not the only issue here. We actually, Zaid Jilani, who writes for The Intercept and actually formerly worked for CAP, and obviously he's very progressive. He's very kind of clear on what he believes, so he didn't get along with them. And actually, he said that there were times where they were not allowed to write certain things because of donors or because it would upset certain people in DC. So obviously, that's just one person's account, but that's how these think tanks work. So it's not a surprise at all. So Jelani's kind of argument, or not even argument, but his evidence was that Neera Tanden was very deeply involved in welfare reform in the Bill Clinton era. So this guy named Bruce Reed, who is another Clinton ally, seems to be a pattern, said that Neera was obviously involved in the implementation of welfare reform, which Neera denies, because obviously it doesn't look good for her. So this part's really funny. I'd actually forgotten this happened. So this guy, Bruce Reed, denied it. But it turns out that Jilani had recorded the conversation, and indeed Reed did say what Jilani said he said, that she was involved in the implementation of welfare reform, which again is interesting because Neera's family was on welfare when she was a child, so you would think she would have better policy on this. So Jilani recorded the conversation, he put it up on Twitter, and the evidence was there. In the meantime, Neera, she said, I'm paraphrasing a lot, but she said, oh, I got an email from Bruce Reed. And he says I wasn't. But instead of showing like an actual email, she or someone had typed up something in the Notes app. So if you have an iPhone, you're familiar with the Notes app. She typed something up in the Notes app, took a screenshot of it, and it's like, Neera was not involved in the implementation of welfare reform, Bruce Reed. She was like, this email from Bruce Reed absolves me. But the internet dragged her like crazy because it was the Notes app, it wasn't a real email. So that's just kind of a funny side note. But WikiLeaks emails show that her tune hasn't really changed when it comes to helping the poor. In fact, she said crazy things like the problem, with the poor is not inequality of wealth. She essentially goes to bat for wealthy people and not for the poor. So that's through, again, WikiLeaks leaked emails. She was very strange when she was on the latest DNC platform committee. She said, so Bill McKibben, if you're not familiar with him, was also on this committee, and he is a very well-known, very truthful, very good environmental activist. And he suggested new language based on Jane Kleeb's proposal about eminent domain as it relates to fossil fuel companies. He suggested adding, Democrats believe government should not aid private companies by using eminent domain to build new fossil fuel infrastructure in the United States. Excuse me. So Tanden was offended by this because apparently she was worried that conservatives would use it against them. But isn't that part of the point? I mean, you're a progressive, right, Neera? And then there's also the healthcare problem, which I got into a little bit ago. 70% of Americans right now support Medicare for all, but Neera Tanden doesn't, which is why in 2008, she and Clinton liberals defeated an amendment on single-payer healthcare, of course. And these days, when you think, a lot of people back in 2008 didn't have as progressive thoughts on healthcare as they do now, it was not as well accepted. Bernie Sanders moved that Overton window and made it acceptable for a lot of people, basically because he explained it well. And Neera, these days, CAP has put out policy papers that do not push for Medicare for all. They push for Medicare Extra for all. And you'll see, again, one of the board members who is probably partially responsible for that. I'm going to go a little bit into John Podesta, who's still on the board. He used to be a Neera spot, but now he's on the board. So Podesta was formerly White House Chief of Staff, former president of CAP, and chairman of the 2016 Hillary Clinton campaign. One of the most powerful people in D.C. I mean, you probably know a lot about John Podesta at this point. Podesta is the definition of a person who hangs on elite coattails and who has gained the trust of these people. For example, in the WikiLeaks emails, he was chatting it up with Sheryl Sandberg and Mark Zuckerberg. He has also attended trips that are sponsored by the United Arab Emirates to the United Arab Emirates. So they give really good donations, so who cares, right? There's also, in the WikiLeaks emails, we found that an executive at Citigroup, Michael Froman, wrote to Podesta suggesting a list of people for White House jobs and cabinet-level positions. But it wasn't just a suggestion. This list was dead on for what was to come in the Obama administration. Progressive Obama, no way. This is just the way things work. He doesn't seem to have a moral compass. He seems to go where the money and the power are. And I could go on and on about John Podesta, but he's been written about a lot. So I want to spend more time on the board members, the other board members. So let's go into former Senate Majority Leader Tom Daschle. This one kind of makes me laugh in a really dark way. So CAP, the progressive think tank, should be surrounding themselves with proponents and thinkers on the topic of Medicare for all. They should have a ton of experts on that, right? So instead they have Tom Daschle on the board. And in 2008, Senator Daschle wrote a book that he thought was going to transform healthcare. And it almost did, because President Obama had tapped him for the position of Health and Human Services Secretary. Unfortunately, Daschle had a little bitty tax issue that pulled the plug on that. But he still had his book, and it is kind of nuts. So CAP, in a summary back then in 2008 of the book, said of it, former Senate Majority Leader Tom Daschle believes the problem is rooted in the healthcare issue and the power of interest groups, doctors, hospitals, insurers, drug companies, researchers, and patient advocates. Good so far. Daschle's solution lies in the Federal Reserve Board. What? A Fed-like health board would offer a public framework within which a private healthcare system can operate. This independent board would create a single standard of care and exert tremendous influence, even those in the private sector. I don't even know where to start. In addition to this crazy idea, he publicly said that implementing single payer would be politically problematic. Again, isn't that the point? You're a progressive. You don't mind talking about things that are politically problematic as long as it helps the people. But that's how it's supposed to work. So you might think, okay, that was in 2008. Maybe he just had backwards ideas. Well, we've learned that giving these people the benefit of the doubt isn't the best strategy. So he went on to start a lobbying firm called the Daschle Group. And I believe he worked with other lobbying groups also. But he didn't call himself a lobbyist, even though that's what he was clearly doing, until 2016. Meanwhile, he has had clients such as Aetna and Blue Cross Blue Shield. Health insurers, private health insurers. So obviously he hasn't come around to single payer. It is in his interest to push things that allow private insurers to continue on. Dashiell's another rich guy. People seem to like him a lot, but he's not a progressive hero, and certainly not on the topic of healthcare. And he's one of the top people at CAP who are healthcare experts. Another guy, another white old guy, is named Glenn Hutchins. He is definitely part of this revolving door in DC. He started out in private equity, but then he joined the transition team of Bill Clinton back during his before his presidency. You might see a pattern here with these Clintons and CAP. He left 2 years later and joined the Blackstone Group, which has its hands in more than one CAP pot. Blackstone is is a big disaster and not something that CAP should be aligned with. And he's also on the board of a ton of things, like so many things that it was very puzzling to me as I was looking through all this. He's the co-chairman of another think tank, the Brookings Institute, which, depending on the source, is either conservative or liberal. More people think it's liberal these days, which actually seems to be, other than the Koch brothers, like the way things are going. More people are putting their money into Democratic think tanks and stuff, which is interesting. And he actually has given so much money that he has a namesake branch called the Hutchins Center on Fiscal and Monetary Policy. Obviously, it's weird that he's on the board of CAP and Brookings. I mean, it's probably not weird in the world of DC, but I find it very strange. And they've actually, like the Brookings Institute has actually used industry-funded studies during Senate testimony, and Elizabeth Warren called them out on it. And actually, some people left Brookings after that. This dude, Hutchins, has also been on the board, or is still on the board, of the following: TD Ameritrade, NASDAQ, the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, the Obama Foundation, and the Council on Foreign Relations. So this, if you remember, I talked about income inequality in NERA earlier. This is really what I was getting at. So Hutchins in WikiLeaks was revealed to have said about income inequality, the big issue which the data highlights is income insecurity rather than income inequality, to which there can be some targeted and innovative public policy response. So downplaying income inequality is absolutely disgusting, and this top thought leader seems to have no idea of what's going on in America. And you would think maybe NERA would set him straight on this. She's the progressive cheerleader after all. But she responds, as you know, I've always seen rising inequality as more of a problem of declining fortunes for the middle class and people trying to get into it than a problem of too many wealthy people. So NERA doesn't think there's a problem of too many wealthy people. What? Income inequality is one of those basic things that a progressive should get and understand, and she does not. The next one we'll talk about is the only other woman on the board, Kristen Mugford. She's a little bit harder to dig into. She's affiliated with Bain Capital, of course, and she was actually the first managing director. She then helped start something called Sanctity Advisors, which later became Bain Capital Credit. So she's a Bain lifer. She has been on the board for Fidelity Charitable, which is actually something, one of CAP's big donors is Fidelity Charitable. So this isn't just a straight donation from, like, say, the regular Fidelity. It is a donor-advised fund, which also is known as a way for rich people to get an immediate tax break. So as soon as they put the money into this fund, they get a tax break. They get to remain anonymous. And then over time, they could do it never, they could do it now. They get to decide which corrupt think tank or other, other good deed they want to give their money to over time. Kristen Mugford has had her hands in multiple roles for CAP. She's been a donor multiple years. She's served on CAP panels. They do speeches and things every once in a while, CAP in DC. And she now serves on the board, of course, but she's also she lectures at Harvard, and she's written papers, and I have not been able to get this access to this full paper. It seems to not be published anywhere but behind a Harvard portal. But it's called The TARP Bailouts, Saving the Banking and Automotive Industries. I don't know. It doesn't sound good. Another one on the board is Tom Steyer. Might be Steyer, sorry. Other than him being a billionaire, which I don't know if there are any truly good billionaires, let me know if there are. He is another white male. He's another former hedge fund manager. His policies seem okay. Like, I did some deep diving into him, and again, let me know if you know anything different, but his policies seem pretty good, and he seems to use his money in ways that he thinks are helpful, at least. But it's still, why is he on the board of a progressive organization? He's a hedge fund manager. He's not in touch with real people. He's another old white guy. This next one is Donald Sussman, and Jordan actually did some reporting on Sussman back during the Clinton campaign. He's a huge, huge Clinton guy, huge, huge donor, yet another white dude. And he's the chief investment officer of the Paloma Fund. He not only is in the world of hedge funds, but he has won actual awards for being a hedge fund guy. He's won the Hedge Fund Review's Lifetime Achievement Award. Way to go, Sussman. Good job. Just the guy you want on your progressive organization's board. He also showed up in the offshore leaks for having had an apparent tax haven in the Virgin Islands. He says he's all clear and good, but because he's, quote, a resident, but the tax benefits are undeniable and his residency is weak at best. I will be sharing a lot more than this in the written piece about Sussman because he's quite a guy. But essentially, when he started this company on the Virgin Islands, and the tax benefits are exceptional. So it's basically a way for him to save more money and not have to pay American taxes, of course, because the billionaires don't get enough tax breaks, apparently. Now we'll get into the worst of them all, in my opinion. I will butcher his name, unfortunately. Hans-Jörg Wyss, W-Y-S-S. He is another old white guy. He's been a donor of CAP. He's a member of the CAP board. He's donated millions to the Clinton Foundation and CAP. And he's, gone to court for sexual assault and causing multiple deaths. What a guy. So the sexual assaults, allegedly, this is the information. There's a woman named Jacqueline Long who was a former employee of his company or his foundation, I believe. And they were in a sexual relationship that kind of went south. On her side, she said it's due to him becoming more and more aggressive and doing things to her that she didn't want to do, but that his power and threats and money, she usually went along with it. For example, her daughter was deeply drug addicted, and he said that he would help her financially and all that, but when she did leave, he pulled that support, and the daughter ended up dying. The lawyer of Jacqueline Long said the sexual behavior that Mr. Wyss required Ms. Long to participate in ran the full gamut of rather perverse sex acts. So CAP and the Clintons, no one said anything about this when this actually didn't even really make the news. I could only find stuff, like I found the original court filings and things, but the only people who reported on it were people on the right, like the Daily Caller and the Washington Examiner. Like, no one on the left reported this. This case did not go to trial or anything like that. It was settled in a private settlement of reportedly $1.5 million. And come to find it, his Wikipedia page says nothing at all about it. This is a rich, powerful white guy. He got away with it. You know what else he got away with is the misdeeds of his company. So Wyss founded Synthes in 1977 as a medical device manufacturer. He later sold it to Johnson & Johnson in 2012. So before he sold it, this company was involved in using unapproved bone cement that ended up in the deaths of 3 people at the hands of a Synthes affiliated doctor. So through this trial, 4 top executives were convicted and sent to prison. Somehow, Weiss, who was named as person number 7 in the filings, ended up getting off scot-free. Synthes had to pay $669,000 in fines, which is nothing to these people, although a federal judge did say the pattern of deception was unparalleled. It's important to note that they tested this bone cement on animals, and those animals died. This stuff was not FDA approved, and Weiss and his company were never held to account. There was a later lawsuit filed by Cynthia Wilson, the daughter of another woman who died later on, Reva Golden. So this is at least 4 people who died because of this. And Cynthia Wilson, the daughter, accused the doctor, Jenn Chapman, the University of Washington, and Cynthia's president, Weiss, of running a criminal enterprise. So this was a different angle than the other case. They tried to make a case, this didn't used to be FDA approved, but they did get the bone cement approved for other things, but not for use in the spine. So they did use it in the spine of Reva Golden, and she died. Cynthia lost the suit, and the corrupt walked. So actually, in the Podesta email leaks, they talk about it. They're sent news clips often about things that are going on, and because this guy was one of their donors and one of the people they turned to, Podesta wrote to someone in the Weiss Foundation, the president of the Weiss Foundation, Molly McCusick. And so Podesta wrote to her and said, "Who's handling this for Weiss?" And he called him HJW. If that's your first response is who's handling this, meaning what PR company do you have? How are you going to clean this up? That's his first reaction. Instead of, oh my gosh, Cap needs to disassociate with this guy whose company had its hands in multiple deaths and continued to do it even after they'd already gotten in trouble for it. In addition to the alleged sexual assault. So the president of the Weiss Foundation, Molly, replied, "Nobody. When it was the sex stuff with Jacqueline Long, he had a lawyer, and I made him hire a communications person in New York who was great." These people just turn my stomach. So that's all I'm going to talk about for now. After this piece is fully finished, I'm working on adding some more stuff that I found about Donald Sussman that Jordan sent me. Look for it, share it, and keep an eye out for more reporting on the corrupt Cap. See you later.